I didn't even finish my sentence before the room went still. Laughter stopped mid-breath. Forks hovered in midair. I blinked, unsure why every pair of eyes had suddenly turned to me. All I'd said was, "Congratulations on what's coming next." That was it. Just one line. A warm toast, a throwaway comment I barely thought about. But across the polished banquet hall, Isla Moreau, VP of Strategy, niece of the CEO, and queen of curated image, locked eyes with me. And something in her smile cracked. Not everyone saw it, but I did. A flicker, a tightening in her jaw, then nothing, a frozen smile, like nothing had happened. And yet, 30 minutes later, 2 junior managers quietly pulled me aside. No explanations, no chance to speak. Just, "Ms. Rhodes, you've been flagged for breach of protocol. Please come with us." My glass slipped in my hand. What protocol? What breach? I spent 11 years building the architecture that keeps Belcourt's financial systems from collapsing. I worked nights, sacrificed weekends, guarded this company with everything I had. And now, with one sentence, I was being erased. The worst part, I didn't even understand what I'd triggered. Before I tell you what happened after they walked me out of that ballroom, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from? And more importantly, have you ever felt punished for simply being in the wrong room at the wrong time while someone with more power made sure you disappeared? Leave a comment if this hit close to home. You're not the only one, and your story might help someone else feel seen. The hallway they led me down felt longer than I remembered. Too quiet, too clean. The kind of sterile quiet that made you feel like a mistake just by breathing. Neither of the 2 junior managers walking beside me said a word. They didn't even look at me. Their faces were tight with discomfort, but they kept their eyes forward. I used to mentor one of them, helped him debug his first system crash at 2 a.m. Now he held the door open like I was an unwanted package being returned. The conference room was colder than it should have been, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the Chicago skyline. But it might as well have been a courtroom, because Isla was already inside, sitting at the head of the table. Her legs crossed her blazer, flawless, not a single strand of hair out of place. And yet, her energy buzzed like a live wire. She didn't greet me, didn't ask me to sit. "Close the door," she said, and the door clicked shut behind me like a final nail. I stood there unsure if this was a misunderstanding or some twisted test. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. She turned slowly, like she'd been waiting for that question. "You violated protocol," she said. No inflection, no elaboration, just a surgical strike. I blinked. What protocol? It was a toast, that's all. Her mouth curved into something that looked like pity but felt more like contempt. "You're not here to speculate, Delaney. You're here to calculate. And lately, you've been forgetting your place." Each word hit like ice dropped down my spine. Behind her, one of the managers shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Then came the sound I'll never forget. The click of a pen. And just like that, Isla signed the paper that would cut me loose. She didn't even read it aloud. But the sentence had been handed down, and the execution had already begun. What I didn't know then was that something else had begun too. Something I'd buried deep, waiting for the day they underestimated me. When I stepped out of that glass room, the world felt quieter. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that buzzes in your ears like something's gone missing, but you can't quite name it yet. I walked through the lobby like a ghost, half expecting someone, anyone, to stop me, to ask if I was okay, to tell me there'd been a mistake, but no one did. The receptionist I used to bring coffee to every Monday morning looked down as I passed. The security guard I once helped fix his daughter's laptop wouldn't meet my eye. I wasn't Delaney anymore. I was just a glitch in their day they hoped would go away quietly. My heels echoed on the marble floor, each step feeling heavier than the last. 11 years. 11 years of solving crises no one else could, of staying late when others slipped out early, of building the system they swore was their crown jewel. All of it reduced to a 30-second signature and a silent walk of shame. The elevator doors opened, and for a second, I hesitated. I wasn't sure what felt worse, walking out, or knowing no one would stop me. Inside the mirrored walls didn't show a woman broken. Not yet. Just one holding herself together, one shallow breath at a time. Then my phone buzzed. For a split second, I thought it might be an apology, a message from someone saying, "This isn't fair." But it wasn't. Subject, termination notice, effective immediately. Position, lead systems architect. Status, access revoked. My name was there. In black and white, crossed out like a typo. I stood in the middle of the street as the revolving doors spun behind me, my reflection already fading from the building's glass. They had erased me. But in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet understanding. If they were going to write me out of the story, then it was time I wrote something of my own. I didn't cry, not when the doors shut behind me. Not when I walked down Madison in heels that suddenly felt too loud for the sidewalk. And not even when the cold hit my face like it had been waiting for me to fall apart. Instead, I stood still, right there on the curb with my coat clutched around me like armor that didn't quite fit anymore. Across the street, the Belcourt Tower shimmered under the city lights, 37 stories of glass and steel, ambition and secrets. A building I helped protect from the inside out. A building that no longer had space for my name. 11 years, that's how long I gave them. In meetings no one invited me to, but I still attended. In fixes I made before people even knew something was broken. In moments where I chose loyalty over credit. And now, all it took was 11 seconds to erase me. A sentence, a signature, a push of a button. I reached into my bag just for something to do with my hands. Fingers brushed my phone, still buzzing quiet me from earlier. I tapped the screen, and there it was. Alert, Tier 4 surveillance protocol activated. Secure data transfer in progress. At first, I stared at it, confused. Then I remembered. The backup protocol, buried deep in the code I wrote. A safeguard no one noticed because no one ever really looked. It wasn't meant for sabotage. It was meant for moments exactly like this. Moments when the people who thought they owned everything finally overreached. I felt something settle in me. Not fire, not fury, just clarity. They thought they'd ended the story, but all they'd done was flip the switch. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, and this time when I looked up at that building, I didn't feel grief. I felt timing. Because something was moving now beneath their feet, behind their screens, inside their system, and they didn't even know it yet. I got home just before midnight, didn't bother with the lights. Just dropped my bag by the door and stood in the dark for a while. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that made the whole day feel like a dream you weren't ready to wake up from. I sat on the edge of the bed, coat still on, phone still in hand. The screen lit up again. Tier 4 surveillance protocol, 68% complete. That line of text shouldn't have made me feel anything, but it did, because that protocol, it wasn't something Belcourt ever knew about. It wasn't listed in any documentation or mentioned in any meeting. It was mine. I'd written it 7 years ago during a weekend no one paid me for, back when I first realized what kind of company I was building systems for. Not just powerful, but reckless, entitled. A place where people like me were praised in private, but discarded the moment we became inconvenient. So I embedded a shield, quietly, carefully. A hidden trigger that only activated under one condition: if my credentials were revoked without proper due process. It wasn't revenge, it was insurance. The system began quietly copying encrypted audit logs to an external watchdog vault separate from Belcourt's servers. Every financial trail, Every manual override, every shadow adjustment Isla thought she'd buried with a few keystrokes was now being unearthed line by line. I hadn't built that system to punish anyone, but I had built it to protect the truth. And in this case, the truth had claws. I watched the dashboard tick past 80%, a strange calm washing over me. No fireworks, no satisfaction, just the steady hum of justice, automated and untouchable. And still, no one at Belcourt even knew it was happening. They thought they'd shut me out, thought the story ended when I walked out that door. But the system I left behind, it remembered me. And soon, they were going to wish it didn't. I wasn't there to see it, of course, but I can picture it clearly. The war room, the 20-foot screen casting a soft blue glow over a long, polished table. Isla seated at the head, surrounded by half-interested analysts and fresh-faced interns pretending they understood what was coming. It was supposed to be a dry run for the investor briefing, just a routine check of the quarterly audit report before the real pitch went live. Instead, the system pushed back. The file refused to open. A red error banner flashed across the screen. Verification failed, report invalid, re-authentication required. At first, she probably blamed the network, maybe snapped her fingers, gestured at IT without saying a word. Isla always hated explaining things. She preferred to command and watch others scramble. But when the second attempt failed and the third locked the dashboard entirely, something shifted. The IT lead, a young guy barely 6 months into the job, tried to keep his voice steady. "It's asking for a level 3 digital signature," he said. "Encrypted key is tied to your predecessor, Delaney Rhodes." I wish I could have seen her face. Just for a second. Not for satisfaction, but for the moment it finally registered. She hadn't just fired me. She'd fired the one person the system still listened to. Her silence must have been razor thin. "Override it," she said. "We've tried. It's not standard encryption, it's proprietary." "Then crack it," she snapped. The room held its breath. Another pause. The young man swallowed hard. "I don't think it can be cracked, not without the original key." That's the moment the illusion cracked. Not the system, her. Isla, who always operated like rules were optional. Isla, who believed everything could be bought, bullied, or buried. She'd just run into the one thing she couldn't control. And the harder she pushed, the deeper the system dug in its heels. But she wasn't done trying. She still had one more move to play, and it involved someone far more dangerous than I ever was. They say power doesn't panic, it just pivots. That night, Isla pivoted. After the system shut her out for the third time, after the IT team failed to brute force past the digital wall, she made a call. Not to legal, not to compliance. She called someone off the books. His name was Rafe Mercer. I'd heard whispers about him back in the day. A cybersecurity mercenary, the kind of person who doesn't show up on LinkedIn, but somehow ends up in boardroom back channels when things go bad enough. He charged 6 figures for a weekend, and Belcourt wired half before he even powered on his machine. They say Isla watched his feed from her penthouse, sitting in silk and steel glass of wine in hand, pretending to be calm. Rafe logged in from somewhere dim monitors, glowing like stars behind him. He barely said hello. "Firewall's smart," he muttered, "but not clever." Lines of code flickered across his screen. Access points tested, protocols mapped, gateways bent one by one. Isla probably started to breathe again, until he paused. Just a second, a flick of hesitation. "What is it?" she asked. Rafe leaned closer, eyes scanning fast. "There's a second layer, biometric." She frowned. "Like a fingerprint." "More than that," he said. "This system's got a double lock, a digital signature and a live ID verification, custom built, tied to a national registry. And guess who it belongs to?" Isla didn't answer. She didn't need to. Rafe didn't smile, didn't joke. He just muttered, "Delaney Rhodes. Without her token, this thing stays dead." I wasn't in that room, but I can imagine the silence that followed, the weight of it, the truth sinking in. Because this wasn't just about code anymore. It was about ownership, control. And for the first time, Isla didn't have either. She didn't scream, she didn't crumble. She just stood up and threw her laptop across the room. And somewhere behind those shattering keys and splintered glass, she made a new decision. She wasn't going to outsmart the system. She was going to break in the old-fashioned way. The alert came at 2:17 a.m., a single buzz on my nightstand. I almost ignored it. I was half asleep, tangled in thoughts I couldn't quiet, still wearing the same clothes from earlier. But something in me stirred. I picked up the phone, squinting at the screen. Unauthorized admin override detected. Live session recording initiated. My heart didn't race. It didn't need to, because I knew exactly what I was about to see. I swiped into the secure dashboard and the camera feed opened. It was her, Isla, alone in her corner office, hair pulled back tight, sleeves rolled up, eyes locked on the monitor like it owed her something. Her fingers flew over the keyboard with precision. This wasn't panic. This was methodical, calculated, like she'd rehearsed it. The logs populated in real time beside her. Manual adjustment Q3 operating loss. Override approved under Isla Moreau. Ledger mask applied. Balance sheet adjusted. No hesitation. No second thoughts. She was rewriting numbers that didn't belong to her. Erasing red ink like it never existed. Covering a gap big enough to bury 100 careers. Maybe more. I sat in silence, watching her reshape financial reality one keystroke at a time. Not a glitch, not a mistake, a decision. And the system caught all of it. Every input, every override, every illegal edit logged, timestamped, stored, and now streaming. For a moment, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry. Just quiet. Because the person on that screen wasn't just breaking the rules. She was betting her future that no one would notice, except someone had. And the moment she hit confirm, the system's backup triggered the final step. A copy of the session was dispatched to the Federal Audit Oversight Commission. I stared at the confirmation message, blinking at the bottom of the screen. Evidence received, case ID generated. The weight of it all pressed down like a storm about to break. She thought she was alone, but the system was watching, and so was I. The investor briefing was scheduled for 10 a.m. sharp, 30 executives, a room full of polished shoes, silk ties, carefully rehearsed smiles. Everything Isla had been building toward for months came down to this one meeting, the final presentation before the quarterly filings went public. The proof that Belcourt was solid, unshakable, and IPO ready. The room was ice cold with air conditioning, but you could still feel the heat. She entered 5 minutes late, unusual even for her. Her uncle, the CFO, was already seated, arms crossed, jaw set. No one made eye contact. Everyone stared at the massive display screen at the end of the room, waiting for the numbers to speak first. Isla pressed a button on the remote. The report loaded, and then stalled. A low chime echoed through the room. Then a flashing banner appeared on the screen. Report validation failed. Data integrity compromised. No one spoke at first. Then the whispers started. System error. Wrong version? Did someone forget to clear the cache? But then came the one question Isla couldn't dodge. Why are our stock prices dropping in real time? Heads turned toward the digital ticker mounted on the far wall. Red everywhere. The numbers were hemorrhaging, point by point, dollar by dollar. Belcourt's valuation falling like a glass off a table. Someone swore under their breath. Someone else stood up, already on the phone with legal. The CFO finally broke the silence. Isla, what is this? She didn't answer. Couldn't. The report wouldn't refresh. The system wouldn't respond. And then the screen went black, just for a second. And when it returned, a new message had appeared. Centered, bold, impossible to ignore. Federal inquiry, active. Data logs submitted. Violation ID BCS 4421. For a moment, the only sound was the soft tap of someone's pen dropping onto the table. Eyes turned to Isla, but she wasn't looking at them. She was staring straight ahead, frozen, because she knew. This wasn't just a technical failure. This was a reckoning. And I hadn't even walked back into the room yet. The call came just after sunrise, a number I hadn't seen since the early days before Isla, before the politics. It belonged to one of the board members. Direct. No assistant. No filter. Delaney, he said, voice clipped. We need to talk now. 25 minutes later, I stood once again in the very boardroom where my silence had once been mistaken for weakness. But this time, I didn't bring a laptop, I didn't bring a notebook, just clarity. The room was half full, the energy brittle. Isla sat near the far end, jaw clenched, mascara slightly smudged. Her uncle beside her, his face gray with disbelief and damage control. No one said a word as I walked in. They didn't need to. They were waiting for an answer, and I already knew the question. The board chair cleared his throat first. Can you bring the system back online? I didn't sit, I didn't nod. I just said calmly, yes, I can. A wave of breath moved through the room. But not for free, I added. Isla flinched, barely perceptible. Her eyes snapped up wide and sharp. My conditions are simple, I continued. 1. Isla resigns. Effective immediately. Publicly. Silence. 2. I said, letting the words hang just long enough to sting. Belcourt transfers the full service contract of the audit control system to my firm. Full rights, exclusive access, ongoing licensing, ownership. A pause followed. Not resistance, calculation. Then Isla's uncle leaned forward. That's extortion. I looked at him, calm, steady. No, that's a transaction, I said. The system isn't down because I sabotaged it. It's down because someone triggered protections they never bothered to understand. I let the silence speak for itself. What I didn't say, but what they all knew, was this. Every adjustment Isla made, every false report, every covered trail, it was all still in the logs, and without me, those logs would keep talking. The board chair leaned back. His nod was slight but final. We accept your terms. And just like that, the room began to shift. But outside, press cameras were gathering. And inside, I still had one more move to make. They didn't clap when I reactivated the system. There were no cheers, no congratulations, just the soft clicking of keys and the collective exhale of a room that had been holding its breath for too long. The reports loaded, the dashboard stabilized, and the bleeding stopped, at least on paper. But the silence that followed wasn't relief, it was respect. Not the performative kind they give you when the cameras are watching, the real kind. Heavy, quiet, earned. The licensing contract sat in front of me. Thick paper, gold stamped, Lock Systems LLC printed across the top. I flipped to the last page. There it was, $2.3 million for maintenance compliance and full operational control. I signed my name slowly, not for drama, but because I wanted to feel every letter. After 11 years of being just the tech person, I was now the architect and the owner of the system they couldn't function without. When I stood, no one stopped me. Isla wasn't at the table anymore. She was downstairs, face half hidden behind oversized sunglasses, being escorted out through the revolving doors. Press lights flashed, reporters shouted, and all she could do was keep walking. Her uncle trailed behind her, his expression hollow, the weight of a legacy in freefall. I took one last look at the boardroom before stepping out. Same polished wood, same etched glass, but the energy had changed. They knew it. And so did I. At the elevator, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the metal doors. Not broken, not erased, present, powerful. Outside the city felt louder than usual. a current in the air, like something had shifted. And maybe it had, because this time I wasn't leaving in silence. I wasn't being escorted out. I wasn't apologizing for making them uncomfortable. I was walking away on my terms, with my name intact. And the next door I opened, it would have my name on it too. My new office wasn't flashy. No velvet chairs, no ego-sized desk. Just clean, light-polished wood and a window that stretched from floor to ceiling, facing the same skyline I once looked up at, wondering where I fit in. Now I know. I don't fit in. I built something of my own. The name on the lease was mine. Lock Systems LLC wasn't just a contract. It was a boundary, a home, a line in the sand. There were no assistants scurrying to pour coffee, no hallway glances of quiet pity. Just stillness, control, and for the first time in years, peace. Isla disappeared from the headlines within a week. A brief corporate statement, a quiet resignation, and a new face introduced to the media. But inside the company, everyone remembered. The silence in that boardroom, the message across the screen, the woman they tried to erase coming back and setting her own price. People asked if it felt like revenge, but honestly, it didn't. It felt like relief. Because this was never about making someone else fall. It was about proving I didn't need their seat when I could build the table. And you know what surprised me most? Not how fast things fell apart once the truth came out, but how quickly I started to feel like myself again when I stopped asking for space in rooms that were never meant for me. There's a quiet power in walking away without burning the place down, but still knowing it'll never stand the same without you. I don't know what you've been through, but if you've ever felt unseen, uninvited, or undervalued, maybe it's not you. Maybe it's the room. And maybe it's time to build your own table too. So tell me, have you ever had to start over on your own terms? I'd love to hear your story.